Hi everyone, welcome back to this video, and in this video we would be looking at two types of hypothesis, which is null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis. So when you do a research, there are different stages. Some sources might show 7, 8, 6 stages, but on a high level there are these 4 steps in a research. So the first one is you define the problem, and after defining the problem you formulate the hypothesis. After formulating the hypothesis, then you test it out with your data, and later on, based on the results, you make a decision. So this is the entire stages of a research. So if you see, formulating the hypothesis, I had taken in a previous video on what is a hypothesis. And when you conduct a hypothesis test, there are two hypotheses that are involved. One is the null hypothesis and the second one is the alternate hypothesis. So that's what we'll be looking at in this video. So let's get into it. So before explaining what are these two hypotheses, I'll give you an example so it'll be easy to understand. So let's say the HR team of a company claims that the employee satisfaction rate has increased 20% since the last quarter. Katie, the CEO, suspects that the satisfaction rate might be more than 20% given the recent benefits provided to the employees. So this is the scenario, and this was the claims that was made by the HR team and the other doubt that the CEO, Katie, had. So if you see given this statement, if you see the existing fact is the employee satisfaction rate has increased 20% since last quarter. This is the existing fact, and if you see, the fact that contradicts the statement is something that the CEO guessed that might or might not be true when compared to this existing fact. So the contradicting to the existing fact, what is that is the employee satisfaction rate has increased more than 20% since the last quarter. So these are the two facts that are stated from different people. So when you take these two, we can classify them as, the first one is the employee satisfaction rate has increased 20% since last quarter. This becomes the null hypothesis. And the second one is the employee satisfaction rate has increased more than 20% since last quarter. It becomes the alternate hypothesis. So now I'll explain why it becomes the null and alternate hypothesis. So if you see a null hypothesis, so as I said, the first statement, the existing facts, is the null hypothesis. So a null hypothesis is often an initial fact about a population, event or phenomena that is based on previous analysis or knowledge. So if you see the existing fact, the initial fact that was claimed by the HR department is the employee satisfaction rate has increased 20% since the last quarter. So this is the initial fact. Based on, the HR team would have done some analysis, and based on previous data, they came up with this statement. And if you see, this becomes the null hypothesis. Okay, so the null hypothesis is denoted as H0 or H0. Why is it H0 or H0? Is because you're taking the statement and you're believing it to be true, and there's no difference from the original statement that was provided. So here the original statement, the HR of a company claims that the employee satisfaction rate has increased 20%. So we are believing that the employee satisfaction rate is increased by 20%. So that's why we denote this null hypothesis as H0 the colon mu is equal to 20%, where mu is the mean. So we are believing that it is equal to 20% as stated by the HR department. So because there is no difference from the hypothesized value, we say that from the hypothesized value and your hypothesis, that's why they say it as H0 is equal to the value that was specified, which is 20%. So this is how you denote a hypothesis. So if you see here, the employee satisfaction rate increased by 20% since the last quarter. It is a null hypothesis. And usually what happens is, when you want to conduct a research, so now here the CEO, Katie, she suspects that it might be more than 20%. So at that time, the researcher who is going to conduct the research will always try to disapprove a null hypothesis. That is, in our case, the researcher will try to disapprove that the employee satisfaction rate has increased 20% since the last quarter. So when I try to disapprove it, either it can be like it's not 20%, it's greater or lesser than 20%. So in order to disapprove this, I need to create another hypothesis statement which leads to the alternate hypothesis. So let's see what is an alternate hypothesis. So if you see in the example that I mentioned, the employee satisfaction rate has increased 20% since the last quarter became the alternate hypothesis, because Katie guesses that it might be more than 20%. So this statement actually contradicts the initial existing hypothesis, which is the null hypothesis. So it's contradicting. It's not increased by 20%, it will be increased more than 20%, which is a contradiction, and it becomes the alternate hypothesis. So if you see the definition of alternate hypothesis, an alternate hypothesis is an hypothesis that contradicts the null hypothesis value by either being greater, lesser than, greater than or equal to, lesser than or equal to, or not equal to the hypothesis value. So in our example here, we say that it's more than 20%. So it's greater than the null hypothesis value. So just like the null hypothesis, alternate hypothesis also has a way in which it is denoted as, which is H1 or H alpha, which is H alternate. So if you see the way it gets represented for our example, you have H alpha colon, you have mu, which is greater than 20%. So this is the way you will be representing your alternate hypothesis, which is a contradiction to your null hypothesis, which is H naught mu is equal to 20%. So now, after creating your null and alternate hypothesis, now what happens? What is the outcome? So here if you see the outcome, so you have here, let's say that you have now your test. You're going to test it out which is going to be true, because two people have stated two different statements, and now you need to find out which is actually right. So here if you take H naught mu is equal to 20%, which is your the null hypothesis, and H alpha mu is greater than 20 is going to be your alternate hypothesis. So let's say the researcher starts collecting data and starts checking which the data, what type of results it is trying to portray, or based on the data what results come up. So when the researcher starts testing out the data, there are two scenarios or two possibilities. One possibility is the data might result in an outcome that supports and approves the null hypothesis. So based on the survey's data collected, and after analyzing and researching that data, the data might say that yes, the employee satisfaction rate was increased by 20%, which is equal to 20%. That is one possible outcome. If that's the case, it means that the null hypothesis is true and the alternate hypothesis will get rejected. Another case might be if the alternate hypothesis is right, which means that your data says that the employee satisfaction rate is not equal to 20, it is greater than 20, then your alternate hypothesis will get accepted and your null hypothesis will get nullified or it will get rejected. But no two hypotheses can be right at the same time. That's the rule. So if the null hypothesis is true, it means that the research has failed. So the alternate hypothesis, if it is proven correct, then the null hypothesis is rejected and the alternate hypothesis will be the true statement for that particular research. So this is about the null and alternate hypothesis. I hope that this was a little informative to you. And if you like this video, please do give this a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe to this channel and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.